So a year ago, a year ago, um, I just, I want you to think to yourself, what were your thoughts about who you were, what home was, yeah, what everyday routine was, and just your connections with everything, whether it's social connections or what you physically connected with, like touching a doorknob or something. And what if you woke up one day and it was all different? And I know right now it wasn't kind of just the next day zap and we're in this world. Um, but for me at 18, it kind of was. Um, My Beautiful Detour is the memoir of my story so far. Um, I know we've seen a lot of online graduations and graduation ceremonies that we haven't really expected to see. Mine wasn't very expected from my end either. This is this picture is my high school graduation. It was Columbia Presbyterian ICU's only graduation ceremony. And this was after I'd woken up from a coma. Um, and then eventually I got to this last picture where I ended up going back to my passion, theater, and using that detour to make my passion burn even brighter. Which is what I feel like we can all do during this time too. It's a time to really go inside and use those opportunities or the obstacles as opportunities and see what we can really what can really make us grow from all this. Plus, what good story doesn't have a detour? I mean, if you watched a movie and you just saw someone walking this straight path the entire time, there would be no plot. um, so this is art I created in retrospect, um, because art was actually one of the flowers on my detour that I discovered completely unexpectedly. But anyway, this is how I'm going to kind of give you the clip notes on my story. That I had always connected with the world of nature, and I loved finding the hidden life in everything. That was what made my world come alive. It was also why I loved being a performer, and musical theater was my world. I loved really getting into a character and capturing their inner life and telling it on stage. And I was so driven as a teenager. I mean, that was what I wanted to do. My life was planned. I was your typical type A, college junior, senior that filled out 17 college applications and was just ready and got accepted to University of Michigan, which has one of the top musical theater programs. And I thought I was good to go. Um, I was studying with a mentor that I really respected, a voice coach in New York, who also really mentored me because he also seemed to see the hidden life in nature, and I connected on that level because I felt like none of my teenager friends, got that part. But then when I was 17, I was taken advantage of, and he started molesting me for nearly a year. And these are pictures I created when I didn't have the words to express it, that I just felt very out of body, like I froze. I didn't understand what was happening. So part of me felt very split in two, like this painting on the left, and then just part of me felt very numb and like blurry. And suddenly I just felt very robotic and mechanical, and I didn't recognize myself anymore. And I couldn't connect the dots. And so I held that secret in for nearly a year, mostly because I still didn't understand in my head what was going on. I was still going back for lessons. And then finally, I told my mother the April of my senior year. And at that point, I was going to get therapy for it and we were going to heal and all that. And then 2 weeks later, I had just a very bad stomach ache that wasn't going away. And then I was rushed to the emergency room where I had built up a blood clot that had so much internal pressure that my stomach literally exploded to the top of the operating room. And so this was April 25th, 2005, my senior year. One day I'm in dance class. The next day, or I learned it was like months later, I'm waking up from a coma, with all these bags and tubes on me. And I'm like, what is going on? My world had changed. And then doctors tell me I had no stomach, I couldn't eat or drink anymore, which was a shock in itself. And then the first thing you ask is, okay, so when can that happen? And they just said, we don't know. Um, so that was a big uncertainty. I just kept telling myself, maybe 2 weeks, tomorrow. And then I was discharged from the hospital, thinking that I could like go into normal life. But I realized that all transitions are transitions. Nothing happens like that. And so I was sent home on IVs, still wanting to immerse myself in the world, but I couldn't even have a sip of water. And food is such a connective thing, not only for your body, but to the world, a social element, part of life. So, how do I engage with the world I miss so much? When I have this uncertainty hanging over my head of, I don't even have a calendar or a deadline or anything. So basically, without going into everything, because that's why the memoir is so big. Um, but I realized in retrospect that I used four very simple strategies to get me through. And these may seem like very cheesy, like words you find on like a Hallmark greeting card. But the truth is, they were all I had. I wasn't in, therapy. I was kind of just going day to day. And the beauty of this is because they're so basic, anyone can use them and at any time. And I learned that these were life skills, they were long term mindsets. And it's proven now because I'm using them now for this uncertainty. So I just wanted to walk you through that really quick. And again, I write more about how I actually use them in my book. But yeah, so the first one is hope. Uh, what I learned is hope is not this like wistful thing, like I hope this happens. You know, hopefully this will happen. Hope is something active. It's something that we have to create. It doesn't just drop on us like a beam of inspiration that magically transports us to what we want. And an example of how I used hope is that, and how I created it is that just like if you're an athlete and you're running a big marathon, I'm not a runner, but I imagine they like envision the finish line and that's how they like feel closer to it. When I got home, and again, I'm not getting any answers from the doctor about when. I made fake countdowns on my wall that said, you have 7 days till I can eat again, then 6 days, 5 days. And I would just repeat that over and over again for years. And it looks crazy, but just seeing it that much closer and more tangible, even though it was, willing suspension of disbelief, um, it made me, it made it more practical. for me. Just like, right now I'm very involved in, climate change activism and healing our environment. And a lot of people, I, sometimes feel like, what can one thing do? What's like, if I just turn off my sink 1 second earlier, what good is that going to do? Or they feel like paralyzed by the news, and like the statistics we hear about climate and things like that. But rather than being paralyzed by the news, if we can start visualizing like the future we want to see in our world and find tangible little action steps to get us there, that's how we create our own hope. So I learned that you create hope in those kind of willing suspension of disbelief baby steps. I ended up, you know, painting food to just visualize that for myself. I ended up, this is going to sound crazy, but you become obsessed with what you don't have too. And I wanted that tangible experience because it made it more tangible for me as a reality. So I started baking meals for my family. Um, not being able to eat, my sense of smell got really good. So I spiced things really well. Um, my next thing is creativity. And creativity is not just for artists. I was never like an artist before this. It's just it's a mindset. It's a way to look at things in new ways. It's how we kind of all have to look at this time in new ways. And so I an example of this is how I discovered painting. Actually, this was the first painting I created, and I'm going to read a brief excerpt from my book about how I discovered painting and how it was became a flower on my detour. So here we go. Art saved me. And this was after, just a preface, this was after my 13th surgery, which was supposed to reconnect all of me. It was 19-hour surgery, and it worked for a week, and I could eat. And then my wound ruptured, and I had to be air vac back to Yale Hospital. And again, food was taken away from me for an unknown period of time. So I was upset because I had tasted life and they took it away. So here's the excerpt. Art saved me. Passing the morning hours at Yale was always the hardest, as I agonizingly waited for the day to start, the sun to rise, the rush of doctors to come in like a stampede of chaos, and then to be left with time monotonously ticking away until the night shift of nurses arrived. I was used to waking up and feeling overpowering sadness. That's why, as soon as the nurses could rearrange my wires at the break of dawn, I'd hop out of bed with my tubes dangling and leaking and fling myself onto the yoga mat that I tucked beside the hospital overbed table. The sooner I could start moving, the less I'd have to think about or feel. But one morning, my sadness was paralyzing. I just didn't want to move at all. But if I couldn't squirm my way out of numbness, what was I supposed to do? Just be with my feelings? I longed for the safety to actually feel, but Yale was a hotbed of too much uncertainty to even try. But if I ignored these feelings, I'd only hurt more. I needed a plan B before this despair threatened to swallow me whole. Some strategy to cope with emotions that were too big to run from. I remember the exact moment I painted for the first time. My mom had brought in some cheap art supplies, canvases, a few brushes, and a set of kid craft acrylics with lids to screw off. along with various gadgets and anything else you could find in the lobby gift shop to help pass the time. For a while, the canvases and paints just sat there, crowded in the corner with the rest of the clutter distractions in my ICU cubicle. But that morning, a solemn feeling of stillness washed over me like a pale tint of blue paint. For the first time, even my racing, anxious heartbeat couldn't drown out my despair. I needed something to hold on to, so I went for the paintbrush, still wrapped in plastic in the dark of the morning. And I thought to myself, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm feeling something really strongly and I can't run from it right now. I'm just going to hold this paintbrush, and whatever this feeling is, I'm just going to put it into this. I remember holding that paintbrush so strongly that my IV was trembling as I pressed down hard on that canvas to drag one smooth, wavy line. I don't remember letting go as the brush dipped from brown to red to blue. What I created was Singing Tree. Nurses who had written me off as the restless manic patient now saw that I had a heart. A quick glance at my medical history should have been enough, but as I made art, they found compassion for the pain I was going through. And they really liked my paintings. Suddenly, creating art became a way to express emotions that were too overwhelming for words. I found my voice again, the Amy I could recognize, who no medical intervention could surgically remove. I used everything in my art, even toilet paper from the hospital bathroom. I painted my trees that I missed. I crafted my inside and outside worlds, bursting with joy and pain, tears and hearts, lightning bolts and flowers. Each morning, before the medical team came in for rounds, I'd take out a plastic palette tray and stare at yet another blank canvas, like the answers the doctors were coming up with. I would dip a small paintbrush into that kid set of paints and paint a brown wavy line, always a call out to my trees to ground me. As the lines thickened, so did their trunks and my sense of confidence. I could know where to go from here, even if doctors couldn't. When I was done, I'd put each canvas outside my hospital room. Soon, the unit began to catch on. Nurses started walking their patients by my room to see what I had created every day. And having an impact on others through my improvised brushstrokes filled me with unanticipated satisfaction, a meaning. Art was sustaining my aliveness. My life had changed, but myself was still vital in whatever colors I dipped my brush in. And so anyway, so that's how I created this painting, and it's funny now. It was created at such a time of, I mean, I can't tell you how much anger and frustration, and it showed me the transformative power of art because rather than running away from those feelings, by embracing those and just being with those tears and painting that angry red, it was a way to not run from it, but it didn't overtake me. I could look at it and face it and move through it. And now people just see this happy dancing tree. And looking back at all my art from that time, it's nice because I could remember, like, oh, I went through that. But now I just have the joy of what the painting left me with me. And that's what I feel like all creativity can do, whether that creativity comes in laughter or cooking or playing a song we love on the radio, anything we can do to transform our energy where we're not locked in our heads, like I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm angry, because our brains are not, we're not just walking brains, we're feeling bodies. And so that really helped me remember that, because at that time my body was covered in all this stuff that I didn't recognize, but art helped me recognize myself again. So, that's, I always talk about how creativity, it's not like a skill, it's just energy. It's the energy we all have in our body, that we can use and transform. Right now, we're feeling a lot of different kinds of energies of emotion, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of cabin fever, a lot of like, when is this going to be over? And rather than get like stuck inside our heads and frozen by that, creativity is a wonderful way to move that energy through us, um, and and make something from it. And whatever you make, again, whether it's just a connection or a gratitude list or something, that's why I've been creating up a storm during this time. So, I always think of the law of conservation of energy. You can't get rid of it, because if we just like smile and pretend everything's okay, it's just going to come out in other ways. That's how we, cope in maladaptive ways. And why not get that out there and share it? Because the beauty of now is we're all kind of experiencing this at the same time. So it's not like there's no empathy. And a big thing that helped me is like what I write about in my book too. These were my five best friends. When I felt out of body, my five superhero senses. And whenever I felt myself getting in my head, because that happens, a lot in trauma, and PTSD, where you think that trauma is happening now, and it's really not. I would call in these five superheroes, and as soon as I could name something for every sense, I would be right here. And that was always a reminder to me that, what, stuff may be going on all around me, but in this tiny bubble of a moment, everything right now is really good. I feel my hands on the desk. Maybe I can smell something in the air. So, yeah, I found ways to feel good through all this, however impossible it may seem. So, zooming ahead for the sake of time. But yeah, I got a lot to share about this. And more than that, creativity leads to compassion, because, like, it was so hard for me to put words to, I woke up from a coma. I'm dealing with all this stuff on me. Plus, then I'm also thinking, oh my God, I have this history of sexual abuse in my past. How do I just put everything together? I didn't have the words. I thought I was going crazy. But so what I did was I just got it out through splotches of paint, and it made me feel better. And the cool thing about art is sometimes it's like a mirror, that we can just put stuff out there and people will come to it and they'll relate to it in their own way. And that's how I felt like part of society again, which leads me to hardcore resiliency skill number three, stories. Um, and again, I talk about this in my book, how I discovered an old book of mythology in a bookstore. And I started looking through it, and I was like, wow, all these myths seem to take this same path of this guy, your girl, in his ordinary world, and then they get sucked into this darkness. They have to fight all these demons. They win somehow, and they eventually come back to their society, but they're transformed and they have a gift to give. I didn't know I discovered like the hero's journey, which you can find in like Star Wars and Wizard of Oz and all of that. But the reason why this was so cool for me was that I didn't have a map. So I'm like, what the heck? I don't have a timeline. That's going to be my timeline. So I just used this archetypal hero's journey and said, okay, I was once in my ordinary world. Then I'm going to step two, step three, all the way to the end. And that was what I followed. to give myself some kind of feeling that I was going somewhere. And that's why I feel like during this time, especially, you know, read stories or like listen to other people's stories. Um, because, we keep that in our back pocket, that like people's paths, we can kind of model after. And I don't know, it gives us, it's always helpful when someone else goes first and we have something to follow and play with. So that's how just one little life stories helped me. Eventually, and this was the picture I showed at the beginning, the cool part about the hero's journey is, you know, this person gets sucked into the darkness, fights all these, battles and demons, and comes back to the world but transformed. Um, and that world is somehow different. And this is what I did because I was always in the world of theater. Eventually, after 27 surgeries and about 6 or 7 years unable to eat or drink, I was surgically reconnected. And I decided, you know what? I want to go back to theater, but now I have a story to tell. I want to tell my own story. So I wrote my first one woman musical, Gutless and Grateful, which I toured in 2012. And this was so cool for me because for the first time, my story felt relatable because I had to make it into a theatrical arc that had you know, a beginning, a middle, a climax, and a takeaway message. And people could relate to, they couldn't relate to my stomach exploding, but everyone could relate to having, a life planned and then having something happen they didn't expect and having to come through the other side. So that was, first of all, it was the first time I shared my story in public. I got to go back to doing what I loved. And I got to connect with my community on who I was now. And that really, it felt like it brought everything full circle for me. Um, and these are actually handouts I can give afterwards on, things that help me figure out, how to tell my story in like a detour kind of format, which I would be happy to share with anyone. But I lead workshops all the time now on how to find the flowers on your detour because that's what premiering Gutless and Grateful helped me do. Um, I don't think I would have called it such a beautiful detour if I wasn't forced to think about when I was creating this show, okay, what did I learn from this? Um, if I'd never gone through this, I would have never met this person. I would have never discovered this about myself. Um, so that's really when it all came together, when I realized that it's impossible for me to say, oh, if this never happened, I'd be doing this and that, because this detour became my life. And, this detour right now we're all experiencing for a year has become our life. So it's more than a detour at this point. It could be playing a pivotal role on who we want to become. So this leads me to my fourth skill, gratitude, which I discovered actually. I had premiered Gutless and Grateful in 2012. A week later, I got my 27th surgery, which was just supposed to clear up some last minute kinks that were not right with the first surgery. And it was a complete disaster. I ended up in Mount Sinai Hospital for 4 months with more open wounds. And again, food and drink was taken away from me for an uncertain amount of time. And as you might be able to tell by now, I need to keep busy. I'm not someone who just wants to stay in bed. And I was starving. So to pass the time in a hospital when you can't eat, I just started making lists from A to Z. and just, making myself think of one thing I was grateful for every letter of the alphabet. And they weren't big things. This is my first list. This was just, I'm trying to read it. Just like, I think P is like procrastinating something. I don't know. It was whatever I could find from that day. Um, but what I realized after keeping these lists for 4 months is that these things I was writing, they were coming from a larger place. They were showing me what really in the bigger picture was important to me, what mattered to me, and what my values were. And I realized that, on a detour, when you feel like your identity's changed, your values always ground you and tell you where you need to go next on a detour. And so doing those gratitude lists not only connected me to myself, it also connected me to the outside world, because in order to be grateful, you can't stay stuck in your head. You have to actually look around and see what's around you and find something to connect with. And it also reminded me that I was more than just these medical circumstances. I was, coming from this much bigger place, for my values, which were much bigger than any kind of patient identity or anything. So, and then eventually, I found more flowers on this detour. Not only did I have the opportunity to be in a show I wrote about my life, I realized that I was dealing with topics that, college students and a lot of people needed for their own resilience. So I started touring my one woman show when I'd always, as a teenager, looked at those open calls and backstage for like national tour auditions. I was touring around the country with my one woman show, which I still, now I'm live streaming to colleges, doing my show and then doing a talk back about mental health and these life skills. Again, another flower that I never would have discovered. Um, and so, and then I premiered another one woman show 2 years ago, which also incorporated 200 projections of my artwork to show both like the internal and external landscape of PTSD. So there was a lot. Um, so then I wanted to talk about quickly. In my first TED talk, I wanted to share about the flowers that we could find on a detour. And so I started with this like silly little hashtag, like love my detour. And I was like, if anyone's had anything unexpected, anything, I just post with the hashtag, which was becoming a thing. I love my detour. I know you're a detourist. And I got stories sent to me from all over the world, from Italy to Kenya to New York to, and people with anything from, going through a breakup to breaking a nail to just moving to a new place, and just what they discovered from it. And sometimes they didn't discover the beauty of that detour until they actually wrote about it, and shared it. But I actually, I'm going to quickly show you something that on my blog that, and this is a call out to anyone too. If you want to share your story in my Love My Detour movement. So here's a little video to go with that. My name is Amy Oestreicher, and I love my detour. What's a detour? A detour is a curve in the road, a bump in the path, a big sign in the middle of our trip that says, sorry, you have to go that way. Believe me, I didn't expect to end up in a coma the April of my senior year of high school. An unexpected blood clot my senior year. That was my detour. The road that followed, even with the 27 surgeries thrown in, became my beautiful detour, Without those twists and turns, setbacks and obstacles, I never would have learned so much about life, the people in my life, and what I'm capable of. If you can appreciate the little twist in your path, that makes you a detourist. A detourist looks for the upside of obstacles. They follow that twisted path because they're curious to see where it may lead. So, are you a detourist? Why wouldn't you be? That's why I want to hear from you. Share your crazy journeys, your detours, the things in life that happen that you didn't expect, whether it's a breakup, a breakdown, a broken nail. Write me and tell me what happened. Draw a picture of your detour, take a photo, sing a song, do a dance, but whatever you do, use the hashtag Love My Detour. That way we can all track each other's journeys. Think of it as a traveler's scrapbook. So consider this a field trip, detourist, and start sharing your travels. Together, we're not alone. I love my detour. Now tell me why you love yours. So anyway, I just made that little thing and I started a whole campaign, and I just had people share their story. And again, on my site, and I post all these links that you can see, but you can read all these people's journeys here, and you can share your own. And the only requirement is it can be any kind of detour. You don't actually have to know where it led you, but maybe in the writing you'll find it. And that's why I find that writing and journaling is a great way to discover things. I mean, now we have plenty of time to journal, so use that time. Um, so and I mean, cheese right now, which so I can eat right now. Cheese is my favorite food. If anyone wants to send me any care packages, um, but I also spent this time during the pandemic recording the audiobook, which I'm really excited about. It's available on all these places. And I mentioned that I was going to give promo codes to any 5 people that if you email me how you've used one of those 4 skills to resilience right now, I'd love to hear. Or if you even want to share your detour story with me. But it was really nice being able to record this because the forward was actually written by the original surgeon that saved my life. And one thing that is really dear to me about the memoir is, I realized that a detour, and trauma, it doesn't just affect the individual, it affects the whole community, and it definitely affected my family too. Obviously hard at first, but people, people found their own flowers from it. And one of my favorite examples is I have 3 brothers. As you read my book, I got a very supportive family. But one of them, as soon as he heard I was in the ICU out of nowhere, he came and he just stayed in the ICU with me. And for the first 72 days, he kept a journal every day. And, it's very hard to read at first because literally the first entry is April 25th. Dad says you won't make it through the night. Stomach exploded. And you see, every day, how it was so day to day. Well, first minute to minute, then day to day, then week to week. But then you kind of see how a family creates their new normal out of it. And slowly there's humor incorporated. I am a firm believer that humor gets us through a lot. But later on, I did find his journal actually stored on my laptop. And so for the first few chapters, I incorporate some of his journal entries into it because it's so interesting to hear what I was experiencing at that time, and then also, what he was experiencing. And the flower he found from his detour is he was so inspired by how doctors saved my life, that he just decided he wanted to become a doctor. Okay. And so we all said, okay. He had just graduated for, political science. But now he's working on the front lines for COVID at Northwell, and he's a doctor, which never would have happened. But it shows that no matter what, we can find the beauty somehow in our detours if we, embrace that path. There's no point in backtracking and wondering, oh, if this had never happened, where would I be? And one flower I've especially discovered now, mostly because of all the found objects around me, is I've always loved creativity. I've always loved theater. But my newest obsession is I'm in a graduate online program at UConn for puppetry, and I've created these puppets who I've fallen in love with. I mean, maybe I'm just lonely during this time. I don't know, but I love how they can bring the hidden life out in everything around us. So that's just something I'm discovering, and there are a lot of things I miss. But I found so many flowers on this that I feel like when things go back to normal, I've created a new normal that I'm happy to take away from. Um, so anyway, and I posted a bunch of links in the chat, but this is my book page. I also I'm I'm actually using my art now on like a lot of different kinds of things, like fun phone cases, and now everyone likes my COVID masks, which are pretty fun. But and then I just wanted to show you one more thing about the power of puppetry, where you can see kind of the newest stuff I'm creating. And this is, all because of this time where I've really had a chance to tell larger stories through the simplest of objects, all by these silly little scarf marionettes that I've kind of created. This is just one looking through a book. And so anyway, there's so much we can discover now. And then the last thing I wanted to share is those 4 skills to resilience are just so important, and anyone can practice them. And a lot of people have read this and have wanted to know how they can incorporate these into their own life. So actually next month, April 6th, I got a workbook coming out on with Apollo Publishers, which I'm really excited about, that has like all this stuff for you to fill out and discover on your own. So I just got the first hard copies a few days ago. So I'm excited about that. And I'm gonna stop talking because I would love to hear any questions or comments, or you can always email me questions, or yeah, if anyone has anything to say or anything like that. Or maybe not.
Any questions out there?
Well, we might not have, but I'm gonna again put
I don't see anything.
yeah, I'm gonna put the links in the chat one more time if anyone wants to. I'm sure you'll share this on your
Yeah, Sherry has raised her hand and would like to ask a question. And Sherry,
Sherry is a member of the virtual puppetry residency that I'm a part of. Hey, Sherry.
Hi, do you want me to talk or type? Can you
Oh,
hear me?
I know
Um,
you talk.
I was really struck by this because during the virtual puppetry residency, there is so much energy and depth of emotion, and I knew we couldn't see it all in 6 weeks. So I'm really glad that I watched you. But I wonder, along with those first paintings in the hall, I think that's what really touched me a lot. Um, were there a couple of pivotal individuals, either inside or outside your family, like you described your brother and the journaling? Was there something else that spun you out of that really stuck place?
Was there something to say? Yeah, um, definitely. And again, it was kind of like a push and pull kind of thing too, because with trauma, I call myself like the queen of dissociation because also I had to learn to stay very numb as a survival skill in my kitchen when you can't eat. It's like okay, I have to continually distract myself and stay out of body. So I think the grounding stuff always like like I I use creativity to help with everything, and that's why I never really connected with like oh ground yourself in now. But if I could imagine like my five senses as like oh five superheroes coming in, I feel like you know that always like brought me back. Um, I think it was just important to remind myself that I had a body because I got trapped a lot in my head a lot. So anything I could do like that, and again, like literally whatever I do obsessively. So I would just paint a ton, theater and voice, like any ways I could get back in my body and doing what I love, like connecting that way. I was really helpful, and I got to be honest, puppetry has been the best mindfulness and grounding practice I've ever had. Because in order to bring a puppet to life, you are required to breathe through the object. If you are not constantly breathing and connecting with that, then it's just like this rag on a stick. So anything that could get me, to realize like I was a full body instead of like
Hmm.
just here. That was what kind of got me out of, because your head can become a little tornado, so yeah.
Who put you on to that? I mean, there had to be a spark toward the beginning, like the five senses that you realized you had to stay grounded with. Do you know how it
I was
spun out?
I was born creating these stories in my head where I always loved nature. I loved seeing like I am maybe because we always went to Disney World and that was like our favorite family trip, but I always imagined everything as animatronic. So I would like take nature walks and be like, there's an Imagineer behind that. So I always thought everything was being animated. I don't know. Again, maybe I blame it on my Disney World visits, but that was how I always grew up. That's why all my friends thought I was a little crazy. But but I was always creating stories. Yeah, definitely. And it's that childlike wonder that I feel like we all have to keep with us, especially now. So, boo on any.